Big E. What a fitting name. This walking tank weighs in at a build 290 pounds, yet is extremely quick and explosive as well. One of the strongest men in the WWE roster, Big E has developed into a superstar loved by fans and is 1/3 of WWE's current most popular stable, The New Day. Since he is closing in on Demolition's record for the longest tag team title reign, what better time for Wrestling Origins, Big E. Ettore Ewing was born on March 1st, 1986 in Tampa, Florida. He is of Afro-Caribbean descent as both of his parents immigrated to the US. Florida has always been associated with wrestling, such as when NWA was located there and today NXT, so Ettore was exposed to it at a young age. He remembers his father telling him stories about the American Dream Dusty Rhodes competing in Tampa, and apparently he even saw Eddie Guerrero compete one time in his hometown. As you can probably guess, Ewing was a big wrestling fan as a kid. He says he preferred the bigger, more muscular wrestlers as they often demonstrated how strong they were. In fact, his idol growing up was actually Goldberg. Ewing actually met Goldberg when he was young, around 12 years old, and even got an autograph. That helps explain why Big E went crazy during Goldberg's entrance when he returned to Raw. As he got older, E got more and more into sports, and in school, he would excel in athletics. He would become state champion in wrestling at 215 pounds, and would also be named Iron Man of the Year during his time at Tampa Prep. He would also play defensive lineman for the Wharton High School football team, though only for 1 year as he transferred there when he was a senior. With only 1 year of high school football under his belt, he didn't receive any enticing offers from colleges. However, he did have a chance encounter with a coach from the Iowa Hawkeyes, who saw him cleanly bench pressing 315 pounds for 10 reps, which sold him on the big man. Ewing would attend Iowa after graduating and was redshirted his first year, meaning he practiced but didn't play. He suffered 2 major knee injuries in 2004 and 2005, which kept him out of action until 2006. He did play that year, but he would suffer another injury that effectively ended his football career. He would graduate with a Bachelor of Arts degree and even completed the first year of the Master's program, but didn't pursue it any further. With a career in football out the window, Ewing turned to the one thing he was always great at: lifting. He would turn his attention to the sport of powerlifting as he was clearly built for it. He would debut in 2009 and competed in his first USA powerlifting meet in July of 2010 in Florida. Ettore would become a top heavyweight lifter and broke multiple records in the 275-pound class. He would shatter 4 Florida state records as well as one on a national scale with his deadlift. Ewing would continue to set records and win competitions for a few years. His personal records are as follow: 711-pound squat, 529-pound bench press, and 799-pound deadlift. Yeah, this guy is strong. It's worth noting though that all of his records have been broken since. Jumping back to 2009 for a minute, Ettore used a series of connections to get in touch with WWE's Jim Ross after it was suggested he look into pro wrestling. For some reason, JR wanted him to send some, and I quote, weird shirtless pics that he took in his apartment to WWE. Not sure exactly why, but hey, whoever received them must have liked them, because they immediately flew him out for a tryout. Later in 2009, it was announced that Ettore Ewing had signed a developmental deal with WWE and was relegated to FCW. He would be given the ring name of Big E Langston and would debut on December 17, 2009. With little wrestling experience and his powerlifting ambitions, Big E wouldn't really do much in developmental besides, well, develop. He kept training hard, and eventually in 2011 he started having some success. On May 12, 2011, Langston and his partner Calvin Reigns defeated Richie Steamboat and Seth Rollins to win the FCW Florida Tag Team Championships. They would hold them for about 2 months before losing them to CJ Parker and Danny Marlowe. Though still in development, Langston would face Antonio Cesaro in April of 2012 as part of the WrestleMania 28 Access event. It was that year that FCW was rebranded to NXT, and Langston would make his debut there on August 1st where he defeated Adam Mercer. This would be the beginning of his push and mark the start of his winning streak. Big E was so dominant in NXT that he would have the referee count to 5 instead of the usual 3 when he pinned an opponent. Langston would have a quick feud with Vicky Guerrero, who would place a bounty on him, but Big E would squash any competitor sent his way. More notably, Langston would begin a feud with The Shield. On January 9th, 2013, Big E would defeat Seth Rollins to win the NXT Championship. He would hold the belt for 6 months, defending it against Conor O'Brien, Corey Graves, Brad Maddox, and Damien Sandow, before losing it to Bo Dallas. Skipping to the end of 2012, Big E Langston would make his main roster debut on December 17th by attacking John Cena and aligning himself with AJ Lee. He would serve as her and her boyfriend Dolph Ziggler's muscle and continued to establish his dominance. Big E and Ziggler would eventually team up and challenge Team Hell No for the WWE Tag Team Championships, but were unsuccessful. E would, however, defeat Daniel Bryan the very next night on Raw. After Dolph Ziggler was injured, Langston would contend for the World Heavyweight Championship against Alberto Del Rio in a best-of-5 series, though would lose 3-2. Skipping forward just a bit, in July, Dolph Ziggler and AJ Lee broke up. AJ then used Big E to attack Ziggler, setting up a feud among the trio. Big E and AJ would eventually team up in a mixed tag match to take on Ziggler and Kaitlyn, the woman who AJ won her women's title from, at SummerSlam. Here, Big E and AJ would lose, which signaled the start of Big E's run as a legitimate singles competitor. In October of 2013, Langston would lose to CM Punk and turn face after Paul Heyman called him a rookie. Soon after, he would receive a match for the Intercontinental Championship against Curtis Axel, but it was scrapped after Axel suffered a legitimate injury. From there, Langston would renew his rivalry with The Shield, challenging Dean Ambrose for the United States title. He would win the match, though via countout, so didn't win the belt. Something similar would happen the next night on Raw as well. In November, Langston would finally get his Intercontinental shot after Axel returned, and he would win the championship. He would successfully defend it against Axel at Survivor Series, as well as at TLC against Damien Sandow and against Jack Swagger at Elimination Chamber. Around this time, Langston became known simply as Big E. Big E would defend his title all the way until May 4th, when he lost it to Bad News Barrett, and failed once again in the rematch. A little while after that, Big E would start teaming with Kofi Kingston. The two, however, would be constantly defeated, which was when Xavier Woods came out and joined forces with them as their manager. However, the group quietly disbanded as Big E began working singles matches again for a while. That is, until in November when WWE began promoting a new group featuring Big E, Woods, and Kingston called The New Day. The New Day would debut at the end of the month and earn themselves a spot in a 4-way tag team match at WrestleMania 31, but couldn't win. The trio were supposed to be overly positive faces, but after a negative response by fans, they kind of became villains. It was as bad guys that they had their first major bit of success, with Big E and Kingston winning the tag team championships from Tyson Kidd and Cesaro. Though the Freebird rule allowed any two members of the stable to defend the titles, it usually came down to Big E and Kofi. The New Day would defend their belts against Kidd and Cesaro in 2 rematches, and again in the first ever tag team elimination chamber match. However, they would drop the belts to the primetime players at Money in the Bank. New Day would compete in a fatal 4-way tag team match at SummerSlam a little while after though, where they won the belts for a second time. New Day would feud with the returning Dudley Boys, but would retain the titles. Big E would also answer John Cena's open challenge for the United States Championship, but was unsuccessful. Moving into 2016, the New Day would turn face once again. They would notably feud with the League of Nations in a best-of-3 series, with New Day coming up with the win despite a loss at WrestleMania 32. At Extreme Rules, the New Day would retain against the Vaudevillains, and once again at Money in the Bank in a fatal 4-way against the Vaudevillains, Gallows and Anderson, and Enzo and Cass. As part of the 2016 WWE Draft, the New Day was brought permanently to Raw, and just a few days later on July 22nd, they became the longest reigning WWE Tag Team Champions, breaking the previous record of 331 days. Since then, the New Day has feuded with Gallows and Anderson, who injured Big E in storyline, only to return and defeat them at Clash of Champions. Most recently, the New Day competed as part of the 10-on-10 Survivor Series Tag Team Elimination match, but were eliminated early on. And that was Wrestling Origins Big E. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for another episode of Wrestling Origins every Friday. Also, if I left anything out, then let me know in the comments. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.